funny thing about Venezuela, and you would have to know about Simón Bolívar in order to understand what's going on with Venezuela today. Now, Simón Bolívar was someone who was attempting to eradicate slavery in Venezuela. Now, to his credit, he went broke doing his revolutionary excursions, if you can call them that. But when he came back after the revolution was won in Venezuela, he came back and he still had some slaves. Don't think it twisted. Don't get it wrong. But he was one of the few of the former Spanish elite, because he was Spaniard, that released his slaves. His compatriots didn't do that. And so what he actually did to not only liberate Venezuela, but liberate Bolivia, liberate Colombia, it was a few countries that he did that. He was directly responsible for it. Now, we come into present time, and it's Chavez that we're looking at in terms of revolutionary activity in Venezuela. Now, the interesting thing about this is that Chavez always, from the very beginning, maintained and claimed his Africanness. But not only his Africanness, but his indigenousness, if you can call it a word. But even still, and I can't remember the Spanish word for it, but basically he would call himself black and Indian in Spanish words. Of course, you can Google that and look it up. And now what we're looking at today and what's going on in Venezuela is a reality that somebody by the name of John Perkins, he was a former CIA agent, and he talked about how they go into Latin American countries and try to, completely debilitate the economy, to try to get people to overthrow, to get the people to such a point to where they overthrow the government. The thing though is that Chavez knew this from the time that he was democratically voted into office. All right, and I want to make that clear. I'm looking at all cameras here. He was democratically voted into office. Okay, and there was a coup, I want to say it was in 2002 maybe, that people came, kidnapped him, and took him out of office. All right, that's pretty much what happens. It was the people. It was the people who came down to the presidential palace and said, hey, we want our guy back. If you don't bring back Chavez, as a matter of fact, I'm probably getting a little bit ahead of myself because I'm a little bit excited about talking about it. But they were having like a old school 1700s type ball where they were like, and I'm not exaggerating here. It was literally a ball to celebrate the guy that the CIA and America and the West put in place. And somebody came to them, like a part, I think it was the military guard, came to them and said, hey, if Chavez doesn't come back, they're going to come in, meaning the thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people that's outside the palace, they're going to come in and kill all of you. So, yeah, you might want to get out of here. And so they allow, the folks who took over to sneak in the secret passage and escape. And then Chavez came back. Now, in the ensuing years of our brother Hugo Chavez, he made astonishing reforms. Astonishing reforms. He cut poverty down by half, by 50%. Like, I think it was close to 50% poverty that Venezuela was in, and through his reforms and what he was doing through his, socialist reforms, it was cut by 50%. So it was 25% basically, around that number. It's around that number. Now, he not only did that, he also empowered women. Like in Venezuela, being a housewife was considered to be a job, and so you got paid for it. In Venezuela, getting gas was literally 12 cents a gallon. In Venezuela, health care was free. In Venezuela, education was free. As a matter of fact, in the rural areas of Venezuela, they would just send people out to make sure that the people was able to get educated. The level of literacy before Chavez and after Chavez is not even close. Like, look, do your Googles. I'm not going to go into this thing. What's happening now with Maduro after Chavez passed? There's some who would criticize Maduro because, some say he made some wrong decisions. All right, fair enough. But this guy Guaido, and I think that's his name, Guaido. He's 35 years old. He was educated at George Washington University in Washington, D.C., and he suddenly just appeared on the scene and said, hey, I'm the president of Venezuela. Now, mind you, everything that they're talking about in terms of anti-democracy and, Venezuela's not a democratic process and all that. Well, what is democratic about someone showing up and saying, hey, I'm the president now? And mind you, nobody in Venezuela knew who he was. No one in Venezuela knew who he was. Now, there's a video out there when he went to a neighborhood. Because, well, I'm the president now. Because, that's obviously how arrogant these capitalist pigs are. Like, think you could just show up in a neighborhood. And it took the Venezuelan authorities to kind of push back the people from getting at his car. Like, and you can watch the video. Like, people were punching and kicking his car, and it's like, well, hold on, wait a minute. If you're the president and if people was behind you, why in the barrio people would be that against you? Like, obviously, if you was beloved and if you was somebody that the people wanted, they wouldn't you at least would have been able to get out the car. At the very least, you'd be able to get out the car. No, he couldn't even get out the car. Couldn't even get out the car. And when I tell you people was getting at him, I mean, they were getting at him. So this whole thing that's happening in Venezuela, we have to understand the history of America in Latin America. And here's a particular point that I want to speak to, because this is the crux to everything. Venezuela, and I'm looking at all cameras here, Venezuela has the biggest oil reserves in the world. Nowhere else in the world is there bigger oil reserves. So you're getting a clear picture on why America want to bring them democracy now? Yeah. It's the oil, dummies. Now, when it comes to this whole thing that Maduro is being anti-democratic and all that, no, it was the opposition. It was the opposition that was being anti-democratic. And again, y'all can look this up, but basically, the opposition stopped the government from moving forward, and then Maduro went to the Constitution to enact something when a certain part of the government wasn't. And then, they try to utilize that as to say, well, Maduro's being unconstitutional, but it was actually the government, it was actually the opposition that was in government who was doing these unconstitutional things, and then Maduro used the Constitution to do those, to basically move past them. Now, another aspect of this is the election aspect of it itself. The CIA and the, Western powers, but basically the CIA, asked Maduro not to run. And he didn't. And Maduro didn't run in their last election. But they did run anyway. Like the opposition party did run anyway. And they lost. They lost. Like it was no kind of refuting it. As a matter of fact, I think it was Jimmy Carter, like the Jimmy Carter organization. He's a part of what can you say, a voter rights organization, or not voter rights, but to make sure they go around the world to make sure that the elections are done fairly. And Venezuela is hailed as one of the greatest voting situations in the world. Every international voting organization hails Venezuela as being one of the best, if not the best, in the world. So when we're talking about Maduro being a dictator, and I'm going to get to that in a second. When we're talking about Maduro being a dictator, well, how can someone be a dictator when there's international organizations saying that the voting process in Venezuela is amongst, if not the fairest in the world? Beyond that, they call Maduro a dictator. Okay. If you want to argue to me that, the guy in Iraq, Saddam Hussein, okay, you want to say that Saddam Hussein was a dictator, all right, fair enough, especially with the crazy things that his sons were doing, like, going and raping women in front of their husbands and all that, fair enough. But what dictator in the history of the world do you know allows opposition demonstrations in the streets of the capital? How is that a dictatorship? Every single last one of them will be killed, they'll be done. How is that a dictatorship? How is it he's a dictator when the vast majority of Venezuelan media goes against the government? How is that a dictatorship? In what way, shape, or fashion can we label that a dictatorship? Now, it's obvious what is going on here, and I mentioned it before. Oil, oil, oil. It's oil, folks. Let's not let's not mince words here. Like, think about this. In our current climate today, everybody, like the left of what this country, is supposed to be, they go against Trump on everything. This is the one thing they're with Trump about. Like, they're all together with Trump. Like, does that not say something to you? Like, how is it that if somebody who is wrong and is just as horrible as Trump, okay, there's nothing you can agree about with Trump with. He's a horrible person. Oh, but when it comes to Venezuela, oh yeah, he's right about that. What the? Like, what? Seriously? And we're not really taking this into consideration. I mean, think about it. When you talk about, like, what came out about Libya turned out to be lies. What came about Iraq turned out to be lies. And like, all of these lies that you're receiving from current media. But we just still take it as if it's true. We don't do any type of investigation. We don't do any type of thinking as if, okay, I see what they're saying. Let me investigate and see if there's something else that's true. No, we just take it and like, oh, okay. Now, this is why having independent African media is so important. Because believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm looking at all cameras, believe it or not, the majority of people in Venezuela are African people. They are us. Chavez, and they're calling it the Chavez government at this point. Like, I don't think it's known by that officially. Officially, it's known as the Bolivarian government. But as of right now, they're calling them. As of right now, they're kind of known as the Chavez government, and that's and this is another point I have to make before we close it out. And this is before I close it out with the importance of having our own media and our own understanding of media and producing these things. Bolivar, the people in Venezuela, they've gone through this before. They've gone through this with Simón Bolivar. Like, even though Simón Bolivar attempted to eradicate slavery. Now, for those who are in the know, they hear about how Haiti aided certain revolutions in Latin America. But it was Simón Bolivar himself who was exiled to Haiti, and he ended up in Haiti. And Haiti gave him ships, gave him weapons, gave him basically troops. And I can't remember who was in charge in Haiti at the time, but basically the request was to abolish slavery, like emancipation of slavery. That was the request. And to Simón Bolivar's credit, he attempted to do that. It didn't follow in that line. Now, it didn't happen so many years later. Now, when we're talking about Venezuela, we have to understand that Simón Bolivar was born and raised in Venezuela. Like, even though he's a popular revolutionary figure throughout South America, in Venezuela, he's that guy. He's that dude. And so when Hugo Chavez took him on, like not took him on, but they're Bolivarians in terms of how those of us in the Old African People's Revolutionary Party are Nkrumah's Therese, Hugo Chavez was a Bolivarian. Now, Hugo Chavez, I would argue, progressed it forward to where people are now referring to the revolutionary government in Venezuela as the Chavista government, meaning Chavista meaning after Hugo Chavez and his teachings. And I would say it's a shame. I say it's a shame because those of us in America, we don't really understand how important Hugo Chavez was. And we don't understand the impact that he had. Not really. And I'm saying that because whatever these capitalists are attempting to do in Venezuela, I guarantee you, they will die before they allow these capitalists to come in and take their country. And we're talking about people who are of African and indigenous descent, the vast majority of them. It's not going to happen. And it's not going to happen because they won't allow it to happen. It's the same thing that when you're talking about Cuba. Now, of course, Cuba didn't have the highly marketable resource that is oil, of course. But how many times they tried to kill Castro? How many times they tried to kill his brother? It didn't happen. And the communist, is it the Communist Party of Cuba? I think I don't want to misquote, but I don't want to misquote that, but I think it's called the Communist Party of Cuba. I think, but they're still in power. Well, that's because of the people in Cuba, and it's because of the fact that they made sure that the population was literate. And this is the legacy of Hugo Chavez. He made sure that the population in Venezuela was literate. So they know who the enemy is. Like, they're not, like, you're not going to come to somebody in Venezuela who looks like me. And mind you, there's a lot of folks in Venezuela who looks like me. You're not going to come to them and say, hey, do you want American intervention? Do you want troops to come on the ground? No. And no, that's not going to happen. What is going to happen is they'll tell you, hey, up until Hugo Chavez, and now what Maduro is at least attempting to continue, we have a government that actually cares about us. Now, I know I said I was going to close this out, but it's still something else that I have to get to. And that's in terms of the oil that Venezuela has. Because it was revealed that the Koch brothers have this huge oil refinery, like apparently the biggest oil refinery in the world. But, before I get to the but, it's located in Texas. And so you would think like, well, it's located in Texas, and so, what's the big deal? You can get oil from there all the time. And no. See, this oil refinery can't accept the oil. The oil in Texas is apparently too clean. So they have to get their oil from Canada. And apparently it's like that sands type of thing. Like it's some dirty oil. Like that's what they call it anyway. Well, Chavez knew this. Our brother knew this. And he knew that the Koch brothers needed this. And so he was charging them out the teeth for it. Oh, he was hitting them up for it. And just, you want my oil, huh? All right, well, you're going to pay this much over market for it. Now, since Chavez died, the U.S. has went into this agreement with Saudi Arabia to overproduce oil, and it dropped oil prices from like maybe 100 something or to like 20 something. It was a precipitous drop, which aided into the economic crisis that's going on in Venezuela. Like, it was an international effort to debilitate Venezuela's earning power. And on top of that, you have sanctions that's been placed upon Venezuela. Now, these sanctions are not, it's not hurting the country in terms of food, because there's, and that's what's being reported in Venezuela. Like, you can't get food, but you can, again, go online, do your Googles. You can see that the food, and there's food readily available. They're not starving for food. Like, you can see they have those type of things. It's the hyperinflation placed upon them by the sanction. It's the, like, for example, they will they can ship oil to the Koch brothers, but the sanctions has made it illegal to pay Venezuela for that oil. So you see, it's not, they try to say it's this humanitarian crisis and everything. Like, it's not that. Like, it was a UN, somebody from the UN went into Venezuela, and then to evaluate the situation, a rapporteur, I think is what they call it. It's basically somebody who reports what's happening. And that person stated the sanctions that the U.S. put on Venezuela is a crime against humanity. So, what are we talking about here when it comes to Venezuela? Like, seriously, what are we talking about here? We're talking about this old school 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s style of attempting to get a coup started so that, the United States and the rest of those Western pigs can put into power so that they can make money. That's what it is.
And these coups tend to work, right?
Typically.
Yeah.
But it's not going to work in Venezuela. It's not going to work. There is too many of us. Like, you have folks, and it's hundreds. And this is the problem with Western media. You'll see a anti-government a protest, and it'll be thousands of people, but you look at them, they're all white. Like, they're white people. They're in high heels, they're dressed nice, and got all these, nice stuff on and everything. Not I know this is nice, but not like nice like this. But, they're dressed nice, and, they're European dress, and they're marching down the street. But what Western media don't show you is, on the same day, there's 5, 6, 7, 10 times as much of people out in the streets demonstrating. And don't get me wrong, of course they don't have something like this one. But they're in jeans, they're in t-shirts, but they're all pro-government. They're all pro-government. So how is it that a government that's being claimed to be against their people, to be committing human rights violations, to be oppressive, to be dictatorial, how is it that you got so many of the people for it? Like, it doesn't make any sense. And so and I'm bringing it back to having our own independent media. We have to look at situations for ourselves. We cannot just take what these news organizations and take what they say like it's just a thing that we should believe. No, we have to do our own investigation, And we have to do our own investigation. And not only do we have to do our own investigation, we have to do our own reporting. Like, we have to do these things for ourselves so that we know the real story and not what something that's being fed to us by the very media whose interest is in taking these countries over and sucking out their resources. Kwesi Brown, All African People's Revolutionary Party.